Good morning, school. October the 25th marks the 610th anniversary of the Battle of Agincourt. Now, this may be something that you've not heard of, so I wanted to take a few minutes just to tell you the story of the Battle of Agincourt and the central individual within it, King Henry V, the Star of Lancaster, who has, I think, a claim quite rightly to be considered Britain's greatest ever king. So the future Henry V was born in Wales in 1386, but he was not a prince at this point. He was son of Henry Bolingbroke, a powerful nobleman. In 1399, though, Henry Bolingbroke led a revolt against King Richard and seized the throne for himself, and naming Henry as his heir. Henry's realm was a troubled one, and he faced constant unrest and rebellion. And so, in 1405, Henry's son, the future Henry V, fought and killed the infamous warrior Harry Hotspur at the Battle of Shrewsbury, and this confirmed his status as a great warrior. Following his father's death in 1413, King Henry V took the throne. He was only 27 years old. But his reign was a troubled one. He was beset by rebellion left, right and centre, and he dealt with this in a ruthless way. Old Sir John Oldcastle, who led rebellion against him, was ruthlessly burned to death as a warning to others, and the members of the Southampton plot who conspired against Henry were also executed. Henry proved himself to be a man of resolute, formidable decision making. But it wasn't all just war. In 1417, he passed legislation which meant that English became the official language of government for the first time, replacing Norman French and Latin, which had been in use since the Norman conquest nearly 400 years before. Henry knew he was unpopular and he needed to get his nobles and the people behind him. And so he decided to consolidate his power, like many subsequent rulers, by invading France. So in 1415 he led an army of footmen, cavalry and archers into France, where he won a decisive victory at the siege of Harfleur. Using cannon, he breached the walls and won a great victory. Having had success at Harfleur and along the northern coast of France, Henry's plan was to march his army to Calais. However, he was blocked by the River Somme. As such, he had to move further south, and then as they trudged up towards Calais, he was caught by the French army at Agincourt. Henry had hoped to avoid the giant French army, but at this point they were low on food and supplies. Many of his men were ill and suffering from dysentery. They had marched on foot over 260 miles over the previous 2.5 weeks. The English were tired, the French outnumbered them and had better equipment. The French cavalry was huge. Henry had about 6,000 men. The French had over 15,000, meaning they were outnumbered by at least 2 to 1. Hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, Henry realised he had to take a defensive position. On the flanks of the army, he got his archers to carve wooden stakes, one for each man, thus creating an impenetrable shield which the French cavalry could not get through, therefore hoping to funnel the French cavalry down towards his main forces. The day leading up to the battle was characterised by heavy rain, and which meant that the recently ploughed fields of Agincourt turned into a muddy, soggy mess. The French cavalry charged towards the English archers, but were unable to get through the stakes, unable to outflank them. The attempt was a disaster, and the French horses were cut down by arrows, causing utter disarray. The French monk of Saint Denis described it as a terrifying hail of arrow shot. It's said that many French soldiers died by suffocating in their armour or even drowning in the muddy field. Charge after charge after charge of French cavalry was met with this hail of longbow arrows and English resistance. The fighting lasted for about 3 hours. Legend has it the French only stopped charging when they could no longer clamber over their own dead. Fighting was brutal and hand to hand. King Henry himself fought valiantly in the battle, having part of his crown knocked off by an opponent's axe. By the end of the battle, Charles d'Albret, the Constable of France, was killed along with John I, Duke of Alençon. About 600 English soldiers would die, but over 6,000 French, many of whom were nobles. This was a massive and decisive English victory for Henry. The Battle of Agincourt is quite rightly celebrated as a huge military victory. Shakespeare wrote about it in his play Henry V, the famous St Crispin's Day speech, bearing testament to the leadership of Henry V. After the battle, a political compromise was reached where Henry V became heir to the throne of France, having married the King of France's daughter. And it looked for a period of time that before long we again would have a joint king of England and France. Henry was truly master of all he surveyed. Sadly, Henry would never get to enjoy the fruits of his labours and never actually became King of France. He died in 1422 of dysentery at the age of 35. Henry V then was a scholar, a warrior, a diplomat, and a fearless leader. He was ruthless, but also famed for inspiring his troops and his generosity and his refusal to give in against overwhelming odds. I think there are many things we can learn from the qualities of Henry V. If you wish to learn more, you can do worse than to read Dan Jones's excellent book Henry V, The Rise of England's Greatest Warrior King. And maybe on October the 25th, when St Crispin's Day comes around, we should take a moment to remember those feats that were done on the field of Agincourt. Okay, thank you, school.